The high-flying Philadelphia Eagles have fallen short this latter half of the NFL season. Not to a huge margin, but still a concerning margin. Losing to the last three above 500, above 500 teams that are division leading. Over now the 10-3 Cowboys. That lost an unconvincing 3-score deficit against the Buffalo Bills and the San Francisco 49ers. That still has one of the biggest remaining winning streaks in the NFL. So did the Philadelphia Eagles after trailing over a 5-game start after falling short by probably the same flaw why they lost the last 3 games when there's only 3 remaining. And I'm not trying to say that the Eagles are going to not finish still with a good seeding in the NFC East. Because second seeding is still probably just still going to be wild card seeding for the Philadelphia Eagles. And losing guys like Cam Yagerins, defensive backs like Darius Slay and Josh Sweat is still detrimental. But I think their biggest positive is also their biggest Achilles heel out of Jalen Hurts. I'm not saying he's a terrible quarterback. He's still with an exceptional QBR. But if we look at the ratio around 19 and freaking 12, his games should have ended in blowouts. An unconvincing 2-score deficit comeback after starting in an overtime thriller after the 3 straight touchdown passes over Sam Howell. And then closing over in overtime after Buffalo Bills opened over a 17-point lead until they closed over the gap. I think it was more convincing, even though it was on a home field advantage in rainy weather. The Seahawks played like how they lost to the Eagles. The Eagles played like how they lost to the New York Jets. Running game was too much of an over-abuse. They're over-reliant over their running game around the red zone. Jalen Hurts makes too many over-ambitious reads over the streak route when there could be possible other options. And I understand he's a dual threat. But a dual threat doesn't mean give an obnoxious read over on the streak in the second half of the game when all you had to do was just either run it or just toss it to a guy that's motioning it out wide, or over an RPO to a guy that wasn't even the main option. And then DK Metcalf just torched the secondary. And then you guys didn't even... And by the way, they've lost over near a majority, over 15-point deficits over the past 2 games against both the Cowboys and the Niners. They've lost to 2 teams already that are below 500 out of the Seattle Seahawks. That fell a game short. And Seahawks are already in the detrimental part of the season. You guys lost to freaking Drew Lock, son. That's already inexcusable. They're still ranked as one of the highest offenses in the league, but look how they are ranked in the top defenses in the league. They are currently ranked 32nd. They have one of the weaker third down conversion rates stops in the NFL. It's without a shadow of a doubt that the Eagles are a good offensive team. And their pass rush was supposed to be good over on paper when you got all Georgia-born, alumni stars. And don't get me wrong, Kevin Byard was a bit of a steal over his pass deflection marks. But that run stop is the only reason why the Eagles keep over close contested games. It's either Darius Slay becomes a ball hawk for one game, and the next remaining games he's poor off his reads. Too many penalties. You'll see that off either not Terrell Edmonds But you'll see that off Bradley Roby. That was on and off starting around the field. He only made 2 consecutive starts in the entire season so far. And Kevin Byard, that was supposed to be a detrimental veteran corner steal, has turned into an inconsistent mess around red zone conversion. The Eagles are still a good team, but they're not a great team. And this could be detrimental to a deep playoff push. Is it sad to say that even though the Bills destroyed the Cowboys are still a more convincing team than the Philadelphia Eagles? And maybe it's just my opinion. I understand Hurts is still a young quarterback. But Hurts is just not an all-around quarterback. They're good off their sneaks, draws, option plays, options off the reads. And don't get me wrong, you got 2 great receivers. You got 2 great receivers out of A.J. Brown. And, of course, A.J. Brown of Devontae Smith. But we know if it wasn't for DeAndre Swift, that's having a breakout season, 4 touchdowns, while being a dual threat running option, nearing 1,000 yards this season over his 13 starts. You guys couldn't move the ball barely around half field. Missing still a plethora of Dallas Goedert that only started around 11. And then just with a desperation signing off your lack of receiving core with Julio Jones. You guys just either don't start the young guys that can actually move the ball for you out of guys like Zacharias, and then just come over like these impossible reads that Jalen Smith can't throw too accurately. He's motioning over the deep ball. He'll stagger around the pocket. It's like you guys are overly reliant over his dual threat ability than you actually are developing over his QB skill. And that's going to be detrimental to his growth if you want him to be a 10-year quarterback in this league. You know who else had that issue? That could barely make overly simplistic reads, but was an outstanding athlete off the dual threat? Cam Newton. You don't want his career, like achievement-wise, to end up like Cam Newton. I'm not saying Cam Newton's not a bad quarterback. It's just when he was overly reliant over his dual threat ability, he'll move over detrimental reads. Like, he could barely get over like a freaking curl route without feeling like the ball was overly low off the arc, and it becomes like 3 and out for a majority of the offenses when they have Christian McCaffrey. That was like the combo dual threat option around the read option. That was like the last time the Carolina Panthers were even a good football team. And now we're seeing the same flaws with this Eagles team. Tush Push been outstanding as a big 3 and out goal line threat offense, but they were doing that like 3rd and 2nd in their game against the Niners, and they got outplayed. And even though Brock Purdy gets a lot of flack because, you know, for critics that know how quarterback is supposed to work, somehow being a good game manager is a giant flaw. Knowing how to play the game, knowing when is the right time to throw, having an arm so you can throw, manage how the reads are supposed to do. Somehow that's just not that reliable. Like we haven't had Hall of Fame quarterbacks that have been dual threat options. I mean, that having game managers, pocket passers, guys that are a bit more either reliant on the guys to make the play that he can throw to, while still having a good record like Brock Purdy. And that's a bit questionable to me because that means some guys just don't know how quarterbacks have worked over the past, like, 70 to 100 years. And I'm not saying we haven't had athletic dual threat quarterbacks that have been big game changers, but usually that was still used as not a necessity, but as a last resort to play make when there is nothing around the plate, and it's like the last time to gain some yardage. Like if you're Steve Young, Fran Tarkenton, Dante Culpepper, Steve McNair, like quarterbacks that just use the ability when they really need to. Not as like a whole scheme to build their football team around. And that barely gets a lot of teams even to the Lombardi twice in a row. Unless it's a good defense that the Eagles obviously do not have, or a revolutionary offense that either than the tush push or as predictable that even the New York Jets can expose, beat them over in the last minute when they only were scoring like 3 field goals for majority of the game and closed over the gap for a rushing touchdown. So I'm not saying that the Eagles won't still close out the season great. There's only 3 games of football left. They can obviously convince Deck and take over the momentum quite quickly with their last remaining games being against the New York Giants that they've beaten before, the Arizona Cardinals that are bottom of the NFC West, and the New York Giants at home at MetLife. This could be a morale starter, but also still a big proving point thanks to facing off against divisional opponents. And it's still a 50-50 chance, knowing like you play this team twice in a row, and it's already December in East Coast area, and that's already going to be detrimental to your morale, knowing how still good the New York Giants defense is. Even though they have nothing to play for, the biggest motivation is making sure that you guys end up not having the morale or momentum heading over to this postseason. So that's the only thing that Giants are looking forward to. That hopefully the Eagles can clean things up, but right now I find them frauds. How you guys feel in the comment section down below. That's it from the DST show. Like, comment, subscribe for more. I apologize for the consummate coughing. I really thought this was going to go away.